that we're on all of our streaming places as well. So give me 1 minute as we make sure we're doing that. And in the meantime, yeah, just hold tight for 1 more minute and we'll get started. All righty. Okay, it's 8 o'clock. Welcome everyone to Tuesday Talks. We're so excited to see you this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're logging in from. So excited to see some people here on Zoom. I know some people are on Xiaotong and on YouTube. And if you would like some Chinese support, 如果需要中文的服务, I'm going to share a QR code right now. And go ahead and scan that QR code. 如果需要中文翻译的话，你可以扫这个二维码。I believe I do have a Korean colleague who's about to log on to YouTube as well. And so if you need some Korean, you can go to the YouTube link and we will make sure that all the chats are being translated. And you can ask questions in your mother tongue if you prefer, and my colleagues will pass those questions over to me as well. So, as always, I want everybody to get their stuff ready, get your chat box open, your Q&A box open, because this is meant to be engaging. We want you to participate. We want you to ask questions right from the get-go, because we're going to have a conversation and we're going to fold your questions in as we talk. We also may or may not play Spot Mr. View. This happens every Tuesday. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, you might be thinking this is really strange, but there will be Mr. View will appear in a window. And so you will want to make sure you have gallery view so you can see all of our faces. And if you happen to see a random person's face in the middle of the talk, take a screenshot and then send it to contact@initialview.com and we will send you a prize. So yeah, make sure you have your screenshot fingers ready for that. And we'll play that game a little bit later. And once again, thank you so much to our sponsor high schools. This list continues to grow. We are super thankful that you are sharing the word about Tuesday Talks and you're getting your friends to join and your counselors and your parents. We couldn't keep doing Tuesday Talks without you all, so thank you for that. Great. Well, without further ado, I am very excited about this topic because I myself am an alumna from Wellesley College. So women's college topics are always super exciting for me, particularly because when I was 17, I told people I will never go to a women's college. And then I found out about Wellesley, and then all of a sudden I was like, I am only going to Wellesley. So I think it's such a fun topic because there are a lot of myths about women's colleges and assumptions about women's colleges that we all have, or maybe we just didn't even consider or know that it was a good option. And then you discover all these gems and reasons for why it might be the perfect place for you. So always delighted to have this topic. And always delighted to work with these colleagues because they're amazing. And so I wanted to give them a brief second to introduce themselves. So let me see, I'm just gonna go in the order of my pictures. Marissa, why don't you start off?
Hi everyone, my name is Marissa Caballero. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a Senior Assistant Director of Admission at Wellesley College, and I'm so excited to be here.
And we'll pass it to Jen.
Jen, who has to unmute. This is Jennifer Russell. She, her pronouns. I am Associate Director of Admissions at Bryn Mawr, and excited to be here.
Great. Mabel.
Hi everyone, my name is Mabel. I'm actually the newest Barnard admissions officer. I am actually class of 2021, so I'm very glad to be here today with all of y'all. So
Great. And Amy?
Hi, I'm Amy Markham. I'm Director of International Admission at Mount Holyoke College, she, her pronouns, and I started my admission career at a women's college, then was at coeducational schools for many years and have now been at Mount Holyoke for 7. So it's great to be back at a women's college.
Wonderful. And Bethany?
Hello, everybody. I'm Bethany. I am an alum of Smith College as well. I graduated in 2018, so I spent 4 years as a student, and I just finished my 1-year anniversary at Smith as an admission officer. I'm an assistant director for international relations. Not international relations, international recruitment. You'll have to excuse me. I'm actually recruiting in Peru right now, and I got about 4-ish hours of sleep. Because of plane rides and things. So my brain is just catching up with all of the things right now.
Well, thank you so much for joining us from Peru. That's amazing and awesome. And I'm so glad that all of you in the audience are joining us from everywhere. And I wanted to take 1 minute to go ahead and launch this poll so that we can find out where you all are in this process, because it's always great for us to kind of know, are you applying to college this year? Are you a parent? Are you a counselor? And so I'm going to give you guys a minute here to answer this poll. And right now it looks like most of you are getting ready to apply this cycle, this season. So that's really great. And that means you have questions probably about what needs to happen on your application. And we'll address some of those things as well. Let me see, one more, let's 30 more seconds. Everybody participating in the poll? Yeah, we've got about 40% of you are applying this year. And then we have a few applying next year. We've got a few younger students, which is awesome. Great to be thinking about your options earlier. And some parents and counselors. Awesome. Well, thank you for participating in my poll. And so the next thing I want to do is hopefully you have your chat open, and I'm going to make sure that you all can chat to everyone right now. And I'm going to put up a question. What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the words women's college? So go ahead and in the chat, start typing just gut reaction. Very first thing that comes to mind. There's no wrong answer here. We just want to see where people are, what you're thinking. Exciting. Yay. Somebody said exciting. Special, leadership, women power. Okay. Family, community, sisterhood, friendly community, girls help girls. These are great. Any others? What other thoughts do you have when you hear the words women's college? Place to develop women leaders, a sense of belonging, a place where everyone can be entitled to women. Boys don't have a chance, no guys. Empowerment, feminism, several people saying feminism. Wonderful. Thank you for responding to this. No boys. Okay. These are great first reactions. Liberal arts, elegant, talky. That's a very interesting comment there. And no inequality. Okay, wonderful. So my next chat question is, what do you think might be a benefit of attending a women's college? So before you listen to all these wonderful women talking about the benefits, what do you already think might be a benefit of attending a women's college? Breaking female stereotypes, close connections. Yeah. Maybe some of you are like, I'm not sure there is a benefit. Gender equality, security, more tailored towards the female mindset and empowering without sexist competition, more opportunities, inner growth, Yeah, and it looks like some people are not so sure about women's colleges. So I'm really glad that you're here because it's good to have several opinions here and then we can have good discussion. But definitely, yeah, it's a bit of a different experience. And it should be a different experience. That's why women's colleges exist. Otherwise, there's been talk for many, many years about maybe we don't need the women's college anymore. But clearly, there are some institutions that realize that no, they're still needed and they are still wonderful and they're still a great option for a lot of people. So these are really great initial reactions, and I really appreciate everybody participating. And I want you to keep asking those questions. I want you to keep going into the chat and the Q&A box so that we can really address some of these things. But I wanted to open it up right now to my colleagues and talk a little bit about some of these things you saw coming into the chat. Are there, let's just go ahead and dispel some of the myths. Like, did you see anything there that made you think, yep, that is a classic myth of the women's college and that is not right and we should talk about it right now? So, gut reactions from the chat so far. Anyone want to start us off?
I think the biggest one that I noticed was that multiple people said no boys or no male perspective. That is one of the biggest misconceptions, actually. Most of our women's colleges actually have partnerships with other coeducational schools. I know Wellesley has some partnerships. I know Bryn Mawr, I know Barnard, as well as Mount Holyoke. They're all part of these networks of institutions where students can actually take classes off campus in coeducational schools. And those students, regardless of what gender they identify as, are able to take classes onto our women's college campuses and be educated within our spaces too. So it's not like we're shutting out all the males in the room. They are definitely going to be there. We have male faculty. We have men walking around our campuses all the time. I saw a student longboard down Wellesley's campus the other week. So it's definitely very normal to kind of see some male species walking around our campus.
Great. What else?
So I noticed something that was a little bit more of a question that's touching on a myth. And that question was, is it okay for girls to grow in an environment where there are no men or no boys, if I'm remembering the question correctly? So, now we know that there are men in the environment. Smith is also a school that has one of those partnerships as well. I think I'll just speak a little bit from my own experience as an alum from Smith, where yes, we have men on our campus, but they might not be the majority. And so I just want to touch a little bit on that kind of concern, like how will that help me or affect me developmentally, where women have the majority of the viewpoint, the majority of the voice in the classroom. And I'll touch a little bit on my perspective as a STEM major. I was a biology major at Smith. And for a period of time, I was also pre-med before I realized that my passion was actually working with you guys. And I noticed that at other schools, I had friends who were pre-med or friends who were STEM majors at other schools. And there is like this high level of competition that I was seeing at my friends' institutions, where there's a mentality of, I need to make sure that I am succeeding and I'm not really going to worry about what everyone else, where everyone else is, because I'm in such a competitive field and I just need to care about myself and not, look at what's happening all around me. And I found that to be exactly the opposite at Smith, where I think there's a mentality of, we're all in this together. We all want to empower each other and make sure that we are succeeding. So many times people that I just didn't know very well in my classes would volunteer and help build a midterm study guide with me. And there was just such a sense of, we want to help each other succeed in the classroom, or succeed in finding an internship, like friends helping me network and things like that. So I think at a women's college, we can move away from this like scarcity mindset of, oh, there's limited opportunities, there's limited funding, there's limited XYZ, and we move toward a mindset thinking about abundance. And there's so much that all of us can take advantage of in terms of the network and the community that we have here, so that being in a field that I was, a very competitive pre-med environment, I didn't feel the competition at Smith. I felt a real sense of community and a sense of, I'm going to help you so that I can benefit down the line. You know, doesn't matter if it's 10 years down the line, 5 months. Like, I think there's an idea that if I help other people, it will come back to me somehow. And it's a very refreshing thing to be in a male-dominated field, knowing that you have that support network, so that even after you graduate from a women's college, that support network is there for career advice, for, you know, anything. They're there to support you. So you get this nice sort of 4-year environment where you get to build your confidence, practice your skill set, and then you have those people there to help and watch you succeed after graduation. So I would definitely say, in terms of my own development, like, I am a huge proponent of the growth that can happen at a women's college.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Can I pick up a little on that, Gloria?
Sure, Amy. Yeah.
So I think I so like agree with everything Bethany just said, and I want to kind of like even take it a step further. I think that young women today feel very confident. And so some of the messages from years ago that women's colleges were great for boosting confidence, I find that a lot of times people think, well, I'm confident, I'm all set, I don't need that. Some of what Bethany's talking about, you only realize certain things in the absence of something else. And so if you've been in a coeducational setting for your education, there may be things that are unconsciously to you disempowering you. You may be opting out of certain things because the norm is a certain way. And it isn't until you get into the environment where there's those disempowering elements aren't there that you realize some things that you didn't even know were holding you back.
Yeah.
And just to give you a couple of examples, and I'm sure that Jen is, and I'm mentioning Jen specifically because she and I have been doing this for such a long time, but that we have read letters of recommendation from teachers, particularly in STEM fields, who will say things like, I didn't expect a girl to be able to be as strong as she is, or I didn't expect that this girl could do as well as the boys. Well, that girl may feel confident, but when you're in an environment where people are subtly or not so subtly expecting less of you, it really does have an impact. And so when you get into the environment that Bethany just described, you start to notice this is different. And that was one of the comments in the chat that I saw, a different choice. This is different. And so what you realize is that the world beyond the women's college is one that has some of these elements that may not always be so uplifting for you. And so it can kind of heighten your awareness or your radar for things that are potentially holding you back. So when you get into the coeducational world, the fully coeducational world, again, afterwards, your mind is just more, you're more attuned to things like, oh, that might be an obstacle for me, but now I know how to go around it. Now I have strategies to identify the things that maybe are holding me back and to find ways to get over it or use my support network to get around it. So I actually think that although some people think that how will I survive in a coeducational world after this, I think you're actually better equipped because you know more.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful insights. I want to ask, especially because both Mabel and Bethany are fairly recent alums, like what were some things that you thought you were getting into, when you applied, and that may have been different, maybe, either in a positive or a negative way, just we're just being honest right now about our experiences. Was there anything that was shocking, surprising, that you wish you kind of knew before you applied?
I think so. I graduated in 21, and I was very much like, similar to you, Gloria. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'll never go to a women's college. Like there's these stereotypes of this fact that like if you put a lot of women in the same place, there's like certain level of cattiness or like these stereotypes that people made me really afraid of like going to a women's college in some ways. And then I went to Barnard and visited, and I was like, oh my God, like I can't imagine going anywhere else. But I think I put a lot of pressure on myself before I got to Barnard of like, oh, because I'm in a women's space, do I feel like I have to always speak up? Do I feel like my voice like needs to always be heard in a way that like, do I have to be confident if I don't feel like confident at that point? Because I was kind of an insecure, like very awkward, like high schooler at that point. I was like, do I have this confidence to be in this space? And then getting to Barnard being like, oh, like I have the space to be confident. And I also can take a step back because I know I have peers who will support me if I don't have the power or have the ability right now to speak up in the way I want to. So I think recognizing there's this balance of not always having to be perfectly confident or perfectly like put together in this way. And then knowing that also Barnard, and I think a lot of the women's colleges in many ways are the space for you to find out what Amy just mentioned. Like there's things that you don't even recognize about yourself till you get there. I was in my first year seminar class and I was like, this is the first time I'm speaking and people are actually listening to me fully and no one's like interjecting or cutting me off in a way that I never experienced in my co-ed spaces before that. Or the fact that I never thought I would do STEM because I never felt like I was really confident in that space. And I ended up being a psych major, which if you had told me when I was 18, I was going to do psych, I would have been like, I'm not doing STEM. Like, I can't imagine you even suggesting that to me. So these like discoveries that you'll find about yourself are surprising and something you get to take with you, I think, beyond just your 4 years at a women's college.
Bethany, did you have anything to add?
Just something small. I guess I came into Smith with like out any conception of like what the alum network would be like. I just never thought about it during my application process, mainly because I was just so focused on getting into a college that I wasn't really thinking about what happens after college, which, it happens. It's a natural thing to do. But I just want to say that I think one of the benefits of attending a women's college is that same mentality that I was talking about like we're all in this together, that very much exists in the alum network of your school. But even more than that, that exists in the alum network of all of the sister colleges. And when you meet a sister alum out in the wild, it's kind of like an instant connection. And you're like, oh my God, I went to Smith and you went to Barnard. Like, it's like you immediately feel a type of shared experience with them. And I've truly never met a sister alum that I did not get along with really well. So I think this was kind of like an unexpected, really cool thing for friend making, but also for networking in terms of your careers. Like, you come to a sister college and you have both the benefit of that alum network, but then you have all of these other schools that are a natural sort of networking community that you can take advantage of.
Well,
Oh,
Jen, Go ahead.
Yeah, I will jump in and second that. I actually am an alum, not of Bryn Mawr, but of another Seven Sister who will remain nameless. But I totally get that sort of like secret handshake between, sort of the sister alums. But I wanted to mention something that I hear students that are surprised about, because you asked like when you get to college, things that students might be surprised about. That there's some interesting gender diversity at women's colleges. So by that, I mean, we understand gender differently now than we did, when we were wearing gloves and pearls and, sitting, having tea. So, things have changed in that. And so women's colleges also reflect that. They're places where your gender shouldn't matter, and whatever diversity on that spectrum is, actually your gender should matter, but it shouldn't matter. So kind of both. I think so it's important to know that. I think, you're going to meet people that are different and have a different idea of what you think gender is. So for some people, that's, kind of surprising, that we have trans women at our institutions, for example. But I think at the core is what all of us have been talking about, is that we all know how empowering it is to be in this kind of environment, where, like I said, in some ways, you don't think about gender at a women's college because you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas, if like we were talking about STEM, if you're in a STEM class, and, I definitely hear students comments about their high school's experience. There were only 2 people in my calculus class, 2 women in my calculus class, for example. So you kind of stand out, or you have to stand taller, or you kind of have to feel like you prove yourself. That is not the case at a women's college. You don't have to prove your gender wherever it is along the spectrum, because we know what you can do, and you just do it. You don't have to prove anything to anybody.
Well, let's talk about, because there are quite a few in the audience today who are applying this year, which means that they've probably already kind of made a decision. Like I am actually going to apply to a women's college, at least. And one of the misconceptions that comes out is that people, are all maybe, I saw some of the comments, girl power, confidence, talky, like communicative. And like, the interesting thing is a women's college is just as diverse as any other college that has come on Tuesday Talks, where we're looking for a diverse community. We're not looking for the same type of person to fill a class, because otherwise you're just robots. So people want to know, like, what type of student is going to be successful, and like, how do I show you that I'm that type of person who's going to be successful, and what is the measure of success? Like, I think that there is a misconception that people who come to women's colleges, they must become the president of their country later on. Like, there's like some, like, this is the type of student that's going to women's college. But we all know, especially those of us who have attended or worked at a women's college for a long time, that you have introverted students, you have extroverted students, you have people who are STEM, and you have people who are humanities focused. You have all of that. So when we talk about what type of student is going to be successful, what are you actually looking for when you're reading an application? There's not a check the box necessarily of like, oh yes, I can see this person being a president of a country in the future, right? So what are you hoping for, looking for when you read and imagine, is this student going to be successful on our campus?
I'll go. Oh, Jen, go ahead. Go, Jen.
Well, I was just going to get the first part out of the way, is that we are all pretty rigorous academic institutions. So we are looking for, obviously, students that can do rigorous academic work and want to do it. And that's kind of what makes them tick. So, so I'm going to put that out there sort of first and foremost, that we, really want to see the kind of academic work that you've done. And I think most of our students just like have a passion for either an academic subject or a topic or something that just really makes them tick and light up. And so I think that's a thread that is common among us, and that I look for, especially on the academic side.
Yeah, great.
I would add that maybe this is less something that we're looking for, but maybe something that successful candidates have in common. And that is that they may be a little bit unconventional. Choosing a women's college is an unconventional choice. Less than 2% of college graduates in the United States went to a women's college. So, and really at the age that you all are, there's a lot of pressure to be like each other and to fit in. And I'm sure that those of you who are pretty interested in a women's college have had people in your life say, really? Why do you want that? And when you're 17 or so years old, sometimes that can be really hard when people are questioning a major decision that you're making. But the students who come to our institutions are all students who had some kind of inner core or something that said, I know myself and I've researched this, and this is going to be good for me. And I'm going to make that choice, even if there are some doubters in my life. So I feel like the students who come to our campuses are people who maybe know themselves pretty well. They might have a little more maturity or independence of mind. They're willing to think about opportunities that aren't just the norm. So when I'm reading an application, when I see elements of a student that show those characteristics, I think that's a good fit student. So it isn't necessarily essential, but I think it's something that our students, and I'm, even though I haven't worked at any of the other women's colleges, but I'm sure that they have that in common as well. And so that is something that can be, that maturity, that self-awareness, is something that I like to see in a candidate.
Something that I'll add to both Jen and Amy's comments are, there's such a power in an individual's story, whatever that story is. And I think when I open an application, I see someone who has those elements of passion, who has those elements of academic rigor, but also try to understand the power of their story, that they can really portray that well, is something I really hold on to. And women's colleges are such an intentional community. And students who navigate the application with intentionality just have the right mindset in my mind. And I think that is when you see someone who's navigating something with that level of intentionality, I feel like will definitely be very successful within the women's college landscape.
Yeah, great. Well, so we talked a little bit about, academic rigor, and obviously the essay is going to be important because you want your story to be told in that way. What are some mistakes that you see on applications that are a little bit like a red flag for you, or you're like, oh, I just wish you didn't do that? What are things that people should really avoid or think about? And maybe that's something that you need to think about earlier, and would be, you shouldn't apply to us if that's the case. Or, it's later on in the process, and you realize, I wish you had been more authentic in that. I wish you didn't, feel that you needed to emphasize this at the detriment of this. Are there common mistakes or red flags that you've seen in the process?
Do you mean this specific to women's colleges, Gloria? Or
Yeah.
In general?
Well, it could be both, but I guess specific to you all, since you do have a unique There are some students where this just is not the right fit for them. Or maybe they were too generic and they used the same application for the co-ed schools and the women's schools that you're not able, yeah. So if it's specific to women's college, great. I mean, we can always talk about good advice generally about the application process as a whole.
I mean, the one thing that comes to my mind is I think we all have some version of why are you applying to our school? And we need to know not why you're applying to a women's, a women's college, because that will answer the question generally, but why, my school in particular. And every year there are students that write a lovely essay and apply to Bryn Mawr and write about Wellesley. So just, triple check that you've got the right college in the right place, and that your answer really reflects the college that you're applying to. All women's colleges are not alike, and there might be a real reason that you're applying to one and not the other. So just check in there.
Yeah, I think something I'll add is to the root of all of our institutions that are present today is that we're a liberal arts institution. So you have to come in wanting to learn not just one thing, but many things. And you want to expose yourself not just to one academic discipline, but to find the intersections of different academic disciplines and live in that gray area. When I am navigating the application and I see someone who's really hyper-focused on just one thing, that is an honest red flag for us as an institutional core that you're not going to be happy within our curriculum. And I think once you really understand the mission of each institution and really hone in on the why, then you also need to understand the root of a liberal arts institution as well, that interdisciplinary learning style, that intersectionality of academic disciplines is very important to all of us. And it's not just the fact that you want to go to a women's college. It's not just the fact you want to go to a liberal arts school. You have to go to both. And you need to layer those reasons on top of each other. And then that's the reasons why you want to go to any one of our institutions. Yeah, that's a great question, Gloria.
Anything else to add in terms of mistakes to avoid?
This isn't necessarily just about women's colleges, but I think something that a lot of people will focus on is the essay. And it's not a mistake. I think it's just common that students tend to write about similar topics because you've had 17, 18 years on this earth and certain kinds of experiences. So, I think we tend to see a lot of essays about maybe a community service project that you did that really impacted you, or a person or a parent that was really influential on you. And these are not things that are mistakes to write about, but I really want to emphasize, for example, with the community service, that you write very specifically how your experience is different than your best friend who went to the same community service project and had the same experience and had the same experiences and saw the same things. How is your essay really, really, really different than that best friend who was right there next to you for the entire experience? So to really zero in on that, because I think sometimes we really want to see the reflection of you in that essay. So that's something I can just highlight.
Yeah, and that's really good advice. And we've talked about it in previous Tuesday talks. If you drop your essay on the ground and it doesn't have a name on it, people should be able to tell it's you. And some of you have similar experiences with others in your class. And if people can't figure out which one it is, then you didn't, talk about your core values as much as you could have. So that's a good reminder for everybody. Speaking of core values, some have been mentioned here. We talked about liberal arts. We talked about, a passion a commitment, unconventionality. But are there others, about your specific institution that you would like to kind of like remind students as they're thinking about, is this the right place for me? Is this where I can thrive? What are some kind of key core values at each of your institutions that you're like, if this resonates with you, apply here?
I can jump in real fast. I think one thing we haven't mentioned yet that I wanted to make sure that we all think about is this idea of curiosity. I think a lot of our institutions want our students to have this curiosity of not just what you know now, because sometimes when you're at 17, you're like, I think I know this so well. Like there's no new information I could possibly gain right now. But when you get to college, you're like, oh, there's so many other things I could possibly do right now. So this curiosity for not just academics, but also just like, what is your life beyond right now at 17 or 18 years old? And then this idea also of self-awareness about your community, about who you are, about what you care about. I think in contrast to what I just said about this curiosity, you also have things that you really care about you bring to college. You don't just like ditch them once you get to college. And those things that you bring with you are things that you can continue to think about and care about. And we want you to bring that to our community so that we can build that here too.
Yeah, great. I want everybody to say something here because you all have different, special things about each of your institutions.
I think I took so long to kind of jump in and answer because I was trying to think of how we could be different. And I think I came back to the mission of Wellesley, and we want to educate women who want to make a difference in the world. And whatever definition of difference you want to create for yourself, I think Wellesley really helps students not only think about themselves and the individuality and empowering the individual, but also empowering the collective and providing the space to then be a mover and a shaker. And if you want to go in and change policy, if you want to go in and really advocate for difference and you see a wrong in the world, you want to make it right. I think that is a true core value that Wellesley holds on tight and really encourages and allows students to kind of explore within our community.
One thing I'll say about Bryn Mawr, and I think we all share some of these same core values, certainly, but we really stress self-governance at Bryn Mawr, and students are very involved in so many layers, almost all layers of the college, in residence halls. There's just a really high level of involvement and I guess accountability. And so, I think students who are willing to maybe take a little bit of a chance to get involved in that way, and they'll be very supportive, and students in the community will be, happy to have you. But I think the self-governance piece of it is pretty strong.
I'll add something that isn't part of our mission formally. It's maybe hinted at a little bit, and I think perhaps part of the reason that some of us are struggling a little bit with this question is because we're really all more similar than we are different. And so you want to try to make sure in a setting like this that your example is something that you don't feel like you're saying we are the only ones. But keeping that in mind, what I would say is something that I really think is wonderful about Mount Holyoke is the nature of the education, and from our mission, it says that we want to provide an academically adventurous experience for students. And what I think students get from that is that by the time they graduate, no matter why they came to Mount Holyoke and what their ideas of their objectives when they got there were, they're going to be able to reflect on their 4 years and say either, I did all those things, or I changed my mind because I learned something new. But on top of that, they're going to be able to say, but I never imagined that my experience was also going to include this and this and this. So that it's sort of this like exceeding, I came for these reasons, but I got those things, but I also walked away with all of these unimaginable things. And that may sound very dreamlike, but I promise you that every alum can name at least 3 things that they're super excited about that they got from their experience that they never even knew was going to be possible when they came.
I definitely see that in our students, and just in talking with students, someone that works in our office, I think I know her, what her interests, research, major, and then she'll tell me something that I just had no idea she was doing. And I don't know, maybe I can put Mabel and Bethany on the spot too. Like, is there something, you did what you meant to do at your college, but like you walked out doing XYZ that you never thought?
Bethany, did you want to?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it because there are many things both academically and professionally that I didn't think about were going to happen. Like, I took some really interesting classes that I just didn't think of exploring, thinking I was coming in as a biology major. One of them being American Sign Language, a language I knew nothing about coming into Smith. And I learned so much and a lot about deaf culture, and it really made me think about different types of cultures that exist in the world. And I think this kind of leads into my answer for like, what is something that we feel like we can identify in like the mission that exists in our student experience. And I think that one thing that I learned at Smith is kind of on the flip side of the empowerment coin. I think there's also really important learning that happens at Smith, and I know at all of your institutions as well. The importance of humility when it comes to learning about people that are different from you, and recognizing some privileges that we all hold. So kind of learning the balance of when you're in a space, when to be speaking really loudly and be your empowered self. And then also like when to take a step back and just learn from the people around you, whether that's professors or fellow students, and sort of recognize, okay, I'm not the expert in this situation. When I was sitting in class learning about deaf culture and American Sign Language, that is not an area where I am an expert. And that is an area where I learned at Smith to be humble and to understand, okay, I'm going to do a lot of learning here, and then I'm going to kind of take what I learn out into the world. We were talking about, that desire for making the world a different place. And then talking about, okay, what are some issues that I learned about in deaf culture, some obstacles that people are facing, and how can I talk to people who don't know anything about deaf culture or deaf people, and help them to sort of learn in the same way that this class I took opened my mind. How to really become someone who is having small conversations with people that might have a big impact on them down the line. And I think, I saw that both academically and socially, both for myself and in terms of the students that I talk to now while working at Smith. I think that is very much prevalent in our institution, but also really at any sister college that you might go to. You'll find that balance there.
Yeah. No, this is great. And I just wanted to encourage all of you, one of the things that I did when I was applying to college, and this is like forever ago. So, but I did talk to multiple current students. And I think it's important to do that. And Tuesday Talks, we always talk about the importance of connecting with current students, because then you get a sense of what it's really like right then and there. But I think I would caution you to not just talk to one, because talking to one is going to be a unique experience of that particular, moment at a particular college about, one specific student. I remember having a certain view about Wellesley after talking to one student, and then talking to a second Wellesley student and having a very different perspective all of a sudden. So, one thing that I would encourage the students here who are like, I don't know, I'm still on the fence and I'm not sure which women's college, should I apply to all of them or should I just apply to a couple of them? To really talk to current students, multiple of them if you can. And I know each of these institutions, you have opportunities for that. So if you have that desire, make sure you reach out so that they can connect you with some people to talk. And there is a question out there, and I will admit, my experience at Wellesley was a long, long time ago and things have changed. But there's definitely a question of like, are women at Wellesley different than women at MIT? Are women at Wellesley different than people at Harvard? Are people at, women at Barnard different than women at Columbia? Like, what's the, do they differ? Do they differ? Is there a stereotype of how they might differ? And what, any thoughts about that, or how to kind of consider that? I want to just real quickly say, like, one of the threads that I have heard today is this community focus of really supporting one another. And that's so counter to what people assume about, women being catty and women being, uber competitive with each other. And I wonder if that feeling feels different, at a Wellesley versus a Harvard, at a Barnard versus a Columbia. So any comments or thoughts about that?
I do. I think, as I was thinking, it's not that women are different, it's that they just had different experiences in their educational environment. And that's completely up to choice. Women at Wellesley choose to come to Wellesley for all different reasons, whether it is the location, the name, like whatever it is. But I genuinely think that if you go to MIT, if you go to Columbia, if you go to Harvard, they're not different. We're all individuals trying to navigate this confusing world, trying to survive a global pandemic still, and trying to just figure out what they want to major in, how they want to major in it, and how to be successful. And I think to the core, every student, specifically for students who are out there, are generally the same. It's just how they decide to be educated is what makes them different. So that's kind of what my gut reaction is that, women at Smith and women at Barnard or women at Mount Holyoke, they're not necessarily different. I mean, we're all individuals and every individual is different. So yes, to an extent, we're all different, but every student is just trying to figure it out. And every student made a choice to go to a coeducational school or not. And I think with that choice comes the consequences and the experiences that are associated with that institution. So, and it's up to the individual, really. So that's kind of my instinct gut reaction. I don't know if my colleagues have anything else to say, but that's just where my brain instantly went to.
I think I'll just add that, it's hard to know what you need or want. But sometimes that you would do better in an environment and so if that there are some things that you wish you had. For example, you're the only female in your linear algebra class. Like you're the only, and you're like, I'd really love to just take some math, some high level math with other women because I know they're out there. And it's just like, I haven't had that environment. And so this is a great time where maybe I could find that environment. There are some things where you can have just as good of an education in high level math at all these other amazing institutions, but they might be still male heavy in that environment. So if you know that about yourself, then yes, like I think knowing what you need and want is a hard situation. You don't, and like Amy mentioned before, like sometimes you don't know that until the absence of, or the, like you just are not sure. And that's the beauty of growing and experiencing and being open-minded. But I'll just add that, like there are times where for certain women and for certain individuals, like that type of environment is a great place to be for growth to happen in a new way. So I think that's a way to kind of approach it. This hour always goes by so fast, and I want to make sure if you have questions and you didn't ask them, go ahead and ask them now because we're only down to 5 minutes, and I want to make sure. And like, we've talked about this in many Tuesday talks, trying to get at like the values, the core values of like, how do I tell the difference between institutions? It's so hard. Like when I go to the website, it just looks beautiful. Like everyone looks beautiful and everyone has similar things. So advice on like how to like feel like I get what this institution is about, and particularly in a time where it's hard to visit, it's hard to come to campus, it's hard to, what are ways that students can fully learn about you? Obviously you each have your own virtual info sessions that I encourage everybody to go to. But what other ways, like when they go to your website, what should they hone in on? Where should they go to really understand how you differ from others?
I think additional to our website, something I would add for Barnard is we have a email address called askastudent@barnard.edu, which is you will reach a current student. As Gloria was mentioning, every current student has a very different experience. And our email address is actually there's a lot of students who are on it. We have like a group of students who run that email address, so you'll have a variety of experiences. And if you want, we can also connect you to a current student that's not on this email, and can then to like someone's like, I'm interested in medical anthropology, which is very specific, and we connect you to someone like that. The websites, as we know, are all very pretty, but we will have our info sessions. We have these current students to connect to. I think also being really diligent, at least what I did back then, was I read. Like I think the pictures are pretty, of course, but definitely read. Like there's a lot of information on all these websites about our academic experience. What is it like to be at this like institution? I think actually taking the time of like even just 30 minutes and reading it very carefully, because there are distinct differences I think come forth if you read it. It seems like very overwhelming at times. So give yourself breaks, but it's definitely worth that time.
Yeah, and I would, for those of you who have participated in Tuesday Talks, we've done kind of that Excel sheet, like when you're doing your college search list, that Excel sheet, and really kind of you picking those values and putting them down in the Excel sheet would be helpful, because then you'll see patterns and special characteristics through that Excel sheet. So definitely do that. I'm going to share, I asked my colleagues to share some words of advice. So I'm going to share that screen as we kind of close up. I want to say, there are, this is the case at every Tuesday Talk. People are like, I know you want to see my passion, but how do I show that to you? And we talk about it, and, there is a limited space in the application to show it. Do you have any advice on how to take advantage of each component to show that excitement for you? It's a lot. And guess what? Next week's Tuesday Talk is about navigating applications, and we're going to talk about these components to talk about how to maximize the components the best that you can. But any real quick words of advice from these colleagues, these 5 wonderful colleagues, in addition to what you wrote here?
Well, one thing that that we haven't necessarily touched upon is about interviews. Coincidentally, interviews I think can be really helpful for us to learn more about you. So don't underestimate the value of that interview.
Yes, definitely. That's one more place where you can fill in the holes or connect the dots, you know, of your activities list, of your essay, of your transcript.
And personality too.
Yeah, personality comes out definitely in a conversation. Yeah. Well, as I mentioned earlier, all of these institutions have their own wonderful sessions where they talk a little bit more specifically about their institution. They give you a little bit of more specific insight without feeling like they're stepping on other people's toes. So if any of these institutions are on your list, definitely, if you haven't already reached out, you should reach out. The understanding them will help you write your application better. And now's the time to do that. So, and in the meantime, I'm leaving all this contact information up. Their websites are there. Take a screenshot of it so you know where to go. And yeah, any other closing words from my colleagues here that you want to say before we say goodbye?
Apply.
Keep an open mind.
Yes. Keep an open mind, apply. And yeah, don't be afraid to try something that you didn't think about trying before. I certainly am glad that I did. And I think back on it all the time. If I had gone with my gut, how disappointed I would have been to miss out on this great, great experience. I tell people all the time, I'm like, I ended up at the best institution for me because I was willing to apply. So definitely think about that as you go into this process. Special thanks to all of you, Marissa, Jennifer, Mabel, Amy, Bethany, and for taking time. It's early for you all, and it's busy season, travel season. Thank you for tuning in from Peru. I'm going to hang on real quick for a few minutes here for anybody who wants a little bit more information about the interview process. So I'm going to hang on here if you want to stay on, but otherwise I'm going to let my colleagues go. Thank you once again for participating in Tuesday Talks. It's so nice to see you all. And yeah, and then see you next week, everyone, for Tuesday Talk. If you're not hanging out here, we'll talk about navigating applications. All right. Have a good night, morning, afternoon. Thank you. All right. For anybody who wants to still stay on, I am here to answer questions. I'm here to talk a little bit about initial view and what how it might help you in your application process. So if you're here for that, go ahead and start putting some questions in. You can put questions into the chat. You can put questions in the Q&A. And I think, yeah, I'll hang out here for like 10 to 15 minutes. For those of you who don't know, Initial View is a platform. It's a video interview platform. So you get to sign up for an interview. You do an interview with us, and then you can send that interview to as many schools as you want. All of those women's colleges, they watch these while they're reading your application. So it's kind of playing in the background sometimes for them as they're looking at your activities list, as they're looking at your essays, as they're looking at your transcripts. So it's a real great way for you to kind of be in the room. And I wish that I had that when I was applying, because it would have been nice to be in the room to advocate for myself. So that's what we are. And let me answer your questions. When should be the proper time to do the interview? Well, if you're a senior and you're applying this year, now is the time. Lots and lots of people have already done their interview or booking their interview right now. The reason why I say now is the time is because sometimes actually doing an interview helps you write a better essay. Because you realize what resonates with you when someone's asking you a question about it. So if someone And so if you don't feel ready to do the formal interview, what I would do is actually get together with your friends, your teachers, your counselors, your parents, and just have lots of conversations and see what brings that excitement out. And when I say excitement, I don't necessarily mean that you're like bubbly, because maybe you're not a bubbly person, but it's just more that you're like, I have an answer for that. And I definitely feel good about it. As you have more conversations, you're going to realize what is important to you. I'll give an example. We had a student come, this is years ago, come to do their interview in August. And she finished the interview and said, I realized after talking to this interviewer for 15 minutes that I don't actually love economics. I thought I liked economics, but then when we're talking about it, I was like, this is kind of boring and I'm not really excited about it. And the one question when we started talking about anthropology is when I got really excited. And so all of a sudden she kind of went back and looked at her school list again and looked at kind of the majors that were offered and really kind of changed her whole application path. So I would say you don't necessarily need to do initial view right this second, but you should do the preparation for initial view right this second. The reason why a lot of people do their interview now is if they're applying early decision, they want to make sure their interview is done and processed and ready. We allow for students to do the interview more than one time if they have to pay again. And if you do it a second time, your second interview is the final interview. You can't go back to the first one. So some students like to do it a little earlier, just in case they want to do it again. I don't recommend doing it again unless you were sick and you just had a really, really bad day. Because most of the time, the first time is great. But if you do it now, then you're done with it. And that's one piece of your application that you're done. If you want to wait to do a second interview, you have to wait 14 days. So you have to wait 2 weeks before you can do it again. So that's how people are doing the timing. Like if you think, oh, I want to make sure it's all done before October 15th. Okay, then I should do the last chance I have to do the interview. Let me say October 1st, and then walk that back 2 more weeks. So middle of September is a great time to be doing it. The interview is online. It is with a real person, and it is a virtual, it's virtual conversation. So you can book a time. If you're a morning person, do it early in the morning. If you're a night owl, do it late at night. We have times at all times of the day. If you cannot find a time that works for you, email us, because we will always be able to find a time. I have never refused anyone in the history of Initial View. Everyone gets a chance. And here's the thing, like people always say, which schools accept Initial View? And I want to say, actually, the admissions process in America has shifted so much, as you all know. COVID has changed things up. Most schools are test optional. There are a lot of optional pieces. And I always say optional equals opportunity. Optional means like this is a chance for you to give evidence to a school. The worst case scenario is they don't watch it, but they don't watch it if you don't send it. So my recommendation is like, just do the interview, because probably at least one of the schools on your list uses Initial View like a lot. And then you might as well send, because we don't charge you extra to send to other schools, you might as well send to every other school that you're applying to, because you might be the first one that's watched. A real impression on that admissions officer. So definitely think about it that way. Just, did you do a good job? Did you reflect who you are? Did you tell your story? And if the case is yes, then go ahead and send it to all the schools you're applying to. There is a question about our writing sample. So the interview is about 15 minutes or so, and then there is a writing sample component. It is a open-ended question. One question, there's no choice, open-ended question, and then you have 20 minutes to type a response. These questions, there are a lot of them. I'm sure you can find some examples online. I've seen some examples out there. We actually try to change up the prompts every so often. There are quite a few of them. I want you to kind of consider it as another way for you to insert your voice, for another way to show your creativity, another way to show your critical thought. But it's not an academic writing. It shouldn't be text. It shouldn't be like if you were texting your friends. It should still have proper structure. But it's not like you're not going to be asked to read a long passage and then reflect on that. It's usually an opinion question. An example is something like, you get into a taxi and you see somebody left their wallet. What do you do? You know, and there's really no right or wrong answer necessarily to that question. So it really is an opportunity for you to just think and be creative. We don't have a word limit for that. And a long piece of writing is not necessarily better than a short piece of writing. So don't get hung up about the words, how many words, but really think for a minute, read the question and answer the question. I think the biggest mistake that happens on a writing sample is that people don't read the question carefully and they just write a bunch of stuff. And then you realize that that's not answering the question. Another big mistake people make is that they've maybe written a lot of essays before, and they try to take a story from another essay and insert it into the writing sample. And that is not a good idea either. Like, you really want to read the question and answer it. So don't, you know, I've seen people write about their grandparents in a writing sample, and I'm like, why? Why did you have to write that? That doesn't really make sense. So be careful with that. I don't think you need to be anxious about it, because most of you have been going to schools that have prepared you to write. And so if you are ready for college, then you're ready for the writing sample. No extra kind of preparation needs to happen, other than, read the question and then answer authentically. These are great questions, everyone, that you're asking. Some other things to think about, like in terms of preparation, if you have the opportunity to record yourself having a conversation with someone, that's really great. For any counselors on this call, we do have like a selfie assessment tool where students can record answers to their questions to you to review. But students and parents that are on this call, you can do this with your phone. You know, you can do this on a WeChat call or a FaceTime call or anything. Record a conversation and then watch it back. I think that is the best way to prepare, because then you realize, like, I wasn't really ready for that question, or I make these weird, you know, I'm always looking over here, and maybe on camera it doesn't look so good because it doesn't look like I'm engaged. You know, these types of things you'll be able to notice when you watch a recording of yourself. Another big tip I have is, I call it the predict the follow-up question game. I would play that with your friends, and play that with your parents, and play that with your counselors. Basically, predict the follow-up question means, we'll just play it right now. I'm gonna pretend I'm the interviewer and you're the interviewee, and I say, what's your favorite subject? And you say math. What do you think my follow-up question should be? You guys can type if you want to. My follow-up question might be, why do you like math? Okay, that's a good follow-up question. What else? What kind of math are you studying right now? Okay, that's a good follow-up question. Another follow-up question might be, do you do any competitions? Another follow-up question might be, what is a problem in the world that you want to solve with math? Okay, there's a lot of follow-up questions. It could go anywhere, right? If you play this game with your friends, you'll realize, oh, I need to think about that more. I need to really think about why I like math. I need to think about, like, is this something that I just like as a hobby, or is it something that I really want to major in and do research in? You know, that's the type of line that you want to be able to go in any line, because your interviewer is a real person. They don't actually have, people always ask me, do you have set questions? And I'm like, no, we don't have set questions. We have people who are really wanting to get to know you, and they're going to try to ask you questions to get you to go over. So if you play this game of ask the follow-up question, you're going to be ready for any direction that the interviewer might take. And remember, the interviewer is on your side. Even if it feels like, oh no, they're like kind of pushing me to answer things, that's because they see potential in you and want you to be able to shine. They want you to be able to say, the hard things, because if you're able to say the hard things, that means you're ready for college. That means you're ready for these women's colleges. They have small classes. They're expecting you to participate. They're expecting you to ask hard questions. They're expecting you to engage. And so if you're able to do that on the interview, they'll feel much more confident that you're going to be successful on their campus. So that when people say, how do I prepare? I'm like, play that follow-up question game and you'll be ready. Any other questions? I have a couple more minutes that I'll stay on here. The interview is $245 US dollars. That's the interview and the writing sample and all you can send model. I think there are a lot of coupons floating around out there. If any of your friends have already signed up for an interview, they have a 5% off coupon that they are going to share for you. And yeah, so make sure you ask around before you book, because there are definitely a lot of coupons floating out there. If you are a junior, you do not need to book your interview now, because there will be plenty of time slots. I will say that if you are a junior, we do have a junior interview, and that's for practice. So if you want to practice earlier, feel free to book one of those. The junior interviews, we actually have admissions officers who will give some feedback and let you know like what you did well and what you could maybe think about and work on some more. So if you're like, I don't have anybody in my community that's going to be able to help me really practice, then you can consider the junior interview as an option to practice. Our interviewers are all people who've either been interviewing with me for more than 5 years, or they're former admissions officers or former college counselors. So they are definitely people who've been talking to a lot of students, a lot of 16 to 20-year-olds. If you feel like, yeah, we don't, you know, sometimes you feel like you jive well with someone and not as well with others. I wouldn't worry about that too much, honestly. I don't want people to like redo interviews just because they felt like they weren't, you know, they didn't jive well with the person. Our interviewer's job is to ask good questions that allow for you to be able to share. You have an opportunity to kind of take control of the conversation a little bit. Do it kindly, do it warmly, do it like, you know, make sure that you remember you're talking to a real human and don't hurt people's feelings or like cut them off. But in some ways, you have a little bit of control over the conversation. You can guide the interviewer to be able to keep asking you questions about a certain topic if that's of great interest to you. Yes, if you are redoing the interview, you cannot pick and choose. So be thoughtful about that. Some people, you know, feel like, oh no, my hair was in my face, or like, you know, or I look really silly and funny and I want to do it again. I would not do it again. I recently asked this question to admissions officers. How often are you actually looking at the video? And they're like, rarely. I'm usually listening to it while I'm looking at other materials. So don't be anxious about how you look. Do be anxious about whether or not you're looking to the side, because you don't want to look like you're reading something. So definitely be engaged. They will kind of look, you know, they are going to look at the video a little bit, but don't be like, oh no, in minute 12, my hair came into my mouth and I didn't move it away, and so I should redo the whole thing. Don't think about it that way, okay? Where is this interview located, uploaded to? So you will have, when you sign up, you have and if you've already signed up for Tuesday Talks, you probably already have this. You have an initial view portal. And inside the portal, when you're done with the interview, you'll get a little notification that says, oh, your interview is processed, and you'll see it there. You'll get to watch it. You should definitely ask a trusted friend, advisor, somebody to watch it with you, because you will be your worst critic. Every time I watch these Tuesday Talk videos, I think, oh, why do I sound like that? So you will definitely be your worst critic. So get a good trusted person to watch it with you who will give you feedback. And then you will be asked to pick one question as your notable question. This just means, admission officer, I really want you to listen to this part especially, but they're going to get the whole interview. They're not going to only get that piece, but it is an option. It's an opportunity for you to help the admission officer focus. So be thoughtful about that. Some people pick the notable because they think they sounded the best there, but if it's not something really meaningful, it doesn't matter how good you sounded. It doesn't matter that your English is the most fluid or fluent at that moment if it's not interesting. So be thoughtful about what you're choosing, because admissions officers often will go to that question first. Once you've picked your notable, and then you can choose the schools that you want to send it to. You can do that at any point. You don't have to pick all 10 schools, all 15 schools at a time. You can pick one school. For example, if you're applying ED anywhere, just send it to the ED school first. Then you can come back later if you're still in the process doing a regular decision, and you can add your schools as you are ready to apply. And then it goes, once you submit, we are basically matching your interview and sending it with 2 institutions. They have different software that pulls the interviews in and then matches it to your application. So we're integrated with most of these softwares. So for the admissions officer, they're literally seeing it as a tab in your file. So this is why people say, yeah, I'm clicking on it and playing it in the background while I look at the rest of your application. It's very easy for them to access. And more often than not, they are watching it multiple times. The first reader is watching it. The second reader has access to it. A lot of times in that last committee when they are fighting for you, it's a much easier way to fight for you when you're actually in the room. I've had many admissions officers tell me that in committee, they will pull up and probably play your notable or play your last question. Is there anything else you want to add? Just because then your voice is basically advocating for yourself. So good question about how this video is uploaded. It's through our system, and it's seamless with these admissions officers software. My tech team has worked really hard to make this happen, so I'm excited that it works. Any other questions? It's been 20 minutes already. If you have any other questions, please do email us at contact@initialview.com. I have lots of colleagues who can answer your questions. If you are at a school and you've never had an info session from Initial View and you're like, oh, we would benefit from that. Our kids, our students, or our parents would benefit from that. Please do let me know, because I have a team of people who do info sessions. I do them sometimes. And we're happy to answer questions, give you a little bit more, the step-by-step process. And sometimes I even do like mini mock interviews just to get the juices flowing for you to play that predictive follow-up question game. So, well, thank you for hanging on with me for this long. I know you all are busy, and the application process is super stressful. My advice to you is to really be yourself. I know everybody in your life right now is telling you how you should write your essay and what you need to do on, how to present your activities. But at the end of the day, you're the one going to college, not your mom, not your teacher, not your counselor. You're the one who's going to college. So really reflect and think about who you are, so that you're able to really present that in a true, authentic way. And you will find the best school for you. It might not feel that way during the process, but there will be a place where you will thrive and fit in and have a good time. And so I'm excited for your future. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. And I hope I'll see many of you next Tuesday. Take care. Bye, everyone.